Okay, so you can see even without going so far, you can see this syntax is very familiar. So even before you start interacting with it, you can see we have a constructor here that's constructing this. There's an object called 3, and it has a scene method on it. Same with the other one, the new.3.perspective camera, then the renderer, the new.3 WebGL renderer. So you can see it's being used in like big applications, big libraries. So this is OOP. I hope now I have convinced you guys that I'm not teaching you legacy code from 1998. Yeah, so you guys can interact with this if you want later on. It has a steep learning curve, but I think once you understand it, it's a very fun library to work with. But you already know OOP, so this should not be so unfamiliar. Okay, so let's now. So now we will go into the code, right? So last week, what we were looking at is this application. Let me open it in my browser. So this is what we are working on. So now if I do a refresh, you can see there's nothing. And if I say Smith, we have John Doe, then we can have another one. Then we can have Jane Doe, then we can have enter. Then now if I refresh my page, because one of the things we had not done was persisting the data. So now if I refresh the page, you can see the data is persisting, right? So then if I delete, and then I do a refresh again, we still have the updated data. So we still just have the locksmith. So now the app is like fully functional. I don't think there's anything left. So we will go through the steps of how I was able to do this pole. So I'll create a new file, and then we'll walk through the steps pole one step by step. First thing I need to do is, first of all, let's just do a recap of what we did, or just look at the code. I need this here. I think I'll remove this for now, and I'll just take it directly from here. So we were using functions. This is what we were doing. But now we want to transform this code into now classes. Okay. So has everyone been able to get the code before I start? Anyone shaweza kuweka code kwa machine zenyu? You can just confirm you have the code, and then you can start using the class syntax. Okay. So you guys can code along. If you have any questions, you'll just tell me. So now the first thing we need to do is this constructor, we need to change it into a class. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So the way to do it is, the syntax is pretty straightforward. So class book, that, and then because we know we need the constructor, we need the title, the author, and the ISBN. The class gives us the constructor method. Then here is where we pass in the title, the author, the ISBN. And you can simply take this code, copy it here. So that's it. That's it for the how to transform this constructor into a class. You're not taking in any methods. It doesn't need any methods. Okay, so that's done. Step 2, we have another one here, this UI controller. So same process. So we need to have the class UI controller. This one doesn't need a constructor because we are not taking in anything. We don't have any properties. So that's it. Let me also see if there's anything else I need to take. Okay, so I'll take this const table body, put it at the top. Some housekeeping. Any other variables that I need here? The form element, this is also global. Take this and put this here as well. Then the rest of the code will remain the same. So we've already created our two constructors, our two classes basically. That's it. Don't need anything else. In terms of the classes, just this is the syntax for it. Now let's finish off the functionality. Now for our UI controller, we know we need to take in some methods. The first one is add book to UI. So the way you do it with classes, remember when you're doing it with functions, you have to, if you want to put this function as a prototype, then you need to use this syntax. You need to target the UI controller dot prototype dot add book to UI. But when you're using classes, you can just pass it in directly and it will be passed as a prototype. You don't need to do anything else. Now put it in as a prototype. You don't need to do like UI controller or anything. By default, it will give you this, it will put this book to UI method in the prototype. And then we know it takes in a book parameter. Then we can just simply come, take this code, because the functionality is not going to change. Prepare. We have another function called alerts. Same case, simply pass it in directly. Alerts takes in an alert type. Then for the rest of the code, we just copy paste it. Functionality of that thing. Take it, paste it in. We have a delete book function. Again, come here, delete. This takes in a target. And then we simply take the functionality for that thing as well. And then we have the last one, which is clear fields. This also takes in, no, this was not taking in anything. So we simply take this code and paste it in. So what is left is simply the event listeners and anything else we might need. Okay, so I'll simply take this thing here, paste it in. That should be it. Now let's go through the code again. So we really haven't changed a lot. We just changed The main section where we have a lot of changes is for the UI controller, because it doesn't take in anything, any properties. We don't even need the constructor. So now you pass in all your methods directly into the controller, and it will automatically put them as prototypes, not part of the original object. So they'll be part of the prototype. So in that case, the syntax is definitely easier because it does something for you. It's doing some extra work for you. Any questions? Are you guys following along also? Is there something I need to redo, or should I go a bit slower? Is there something I need to repeat? Okay. So let's confirm it's working as you guys continue. So we know this is called app3.js. So this is going to be minus the holding the state minus the persisting the state, because we have not implemented that. So I'm going to not call classes.js, instead called app3.js. See whether we still have the original functionality without the persisting the data. See whether we have any errors in the console. We have no errors. Let's try to have the original functionality. Arrow, Jingo, another book. Arrow, true. Book. To delete the book. Deleting successfully. Let's try to click here. You can see I also fixed the alert. Anytime you click anywhere here, there was an issue. It would alert even if you click this section of the body, but now it's not alerting. I delete this. It's also working. So we have perfect functionality. It's working the exact same way. So you can see it's pretty easy to have the same functionality and just transform it into a class to now ES6 syntax. Anybody who is left behind, Ama, there's something I need to repeat. So the way I was able, just before we got into the persisting, the way I was able to fix the alerts issue is, you remember when we initially, down here, right here, I had my UI.alerts here, right here. So what I simply did, I moved it to only alert when I am sure I have the element that matches the delete. So I just put it here. So now it only alerts if this thing is true. If target.classes contains delete, then we can have the alert. That's the only thing I changed. Okay. All right, so now let's move on. If there's no question, we can move on. Is there anybody who has asked a question in the chat? Okay. All right. So let me continue. So we want to persist the data. We want to keep the data when we refresh the page, because currently, if I add a new book, and I enter, right? We have a book here. If I refresh, the book disappears. We want to persist that data. So by default, browsers come with local storage. So it's been there since Kitambo Sana. It's one of the oldest implementations of storing data. So initially we want to implement it using local storage, but I will show you a better way to do it that also allows you to use local storage. Right, so it's called local forage. Local local forage. Forage. Let's open it up. Okay. Let me open the actual page. On the GitHub, I want the same thing. So if you come to the beginning, they'll tell you, so local forage is a JavaScript library that improves the offline experience of your web app by using an asynchronous store with a simple local storage like API. So it allows developers to store many types of data instead of just strings. So when you're using local storage, like there's an example here, when you're using local storage, you can only save string values. So even if you want to store an array, you need to store it as a string value. So you need to stringify it using the json.stringify, because local storage only accepts string values. But now with local forage, you can store any type of data. So you can have an object, an array, you name it, it's going to accept it. And then it's using an asynchronous like data store. So you can use the .thens, returns a promise. So you can use .thens to do something. So as you can see, the same code, this same code here for local storage set item, then you give it a key. So how will you identify that item in your local storage? You give it a key, and then the value, you stringify the value, and then you do something else. But now with local forage, you set the item, you give the item a key, and then you give it a value. So this can be an array, an object, anything, a Boolean value, and then .then, because it's like a promise. It also supports callbacks, like you see here, but we'll be using the .then, but I think I'll mostly be using the async await. Okay, so now what we want to do is save this information. So every time we have a new book, we want to create a new item. So we want to set a new item, call that item books, and then give it the value of an array of objects. So every object is going to be the title, the author, and the ISBN. So the book, basically, the book that we get from the constructor every time we have the book. We want to have an array of books. Each book is an object. So let's go through the process of actually using local forage. So anytime you want to use like an external library, right, and you're not using like React or anything, so you're not going to have, you don't want to use like npm install something, you can use the CDN. So I'll just use the CDN. So I'll just go to cdn.js, and then I can just look for local forage. It is local forage. I can just take the script. I can go into my HTML, and then I can paste in that script. So it's right here, but I'll just do it again. Already did it, but I will do it again. So I simply replace the script tag, the same thing. So now what it's done is any objects, any methods that are available to local forage are now available to app3.js. So now I can use, let me split the screens. I can use this syntax, local forage.set item. Okay. With this, no longer need them to be split, so I'll just open one. So now I have access to this local forage, this thing, this object. So let's prove that we actually have it. So what I want to do is I can come down here in the global scope, right? I want to see whether I have access to local local forage. So I will try to get an item, right? So I will try to get an item from local forage. So local forage, it's not capital, sorry, forage, and then dot get item, and then I give it the key that I want. So in this case, I can try to look for a key called books. Okay. And then now what happens next is, right, I'm getting this item. We know that this particular thing is returning a promise. So you can either use the dot then, or you can use the async await. So for now, I will use the dot then. We know that dot then takes in a callback function, has the value, but then in case there's an error, I'm going to call function error. Then I'm using ES5 functions because you have not covered ES6. So now I can come in console log value, come in console log error. So now let's see if if JavaScript is complaining about local forage. Okay. If I open up my console, you can see it's not complaining now. This array is coming from my initial implementation. So it is working. It's working. We already have access to local forage because of that script that we put just before our own JS file here. So we now have access to local forage. We can set new items, we can get new items. Okay, so the way to clear your database, the way to clear your local forage data store is if I go into my opening two apps. This is what I wanted. If I go into this, here we're getting the array still. Now, if I come into the documentation, right here, you can see if you want to clear the storage, this one here, I can clear the whole, if I have any stores, right? For example, I have a book store. If I want to clear it, then you can simply take this code, clears all the stores that you might have. Simply replace it with this for now. Now, this will clear all my stores. If I have a store called books, if I have a store called something else, to clear all of them. So now if I check again in the UI, check the console, you can see database is now empty. So it's cleared everything. So now if I try to redo the same thing again, get items, it's now null. You see, it's not undefined. It's not telling me that local forage is undefined. It's simply telling me we don't have a store called books. So it's null. So there's nothing. So we have successfully cleared our store. Anybody with a question up to that point? Okay. Right. No longer need this. So let's now go through the logic for the code. Now, at what point do we want to create a new books store, right? So at what point do we want to run this code of set item? At what point do we want to say, right, local forage dot set item, and then books, and then pass in an array of books? Now, based off of what we currently have, we want it to happen when we add a new book to the UI, right? We want it to happen when we do this. So when we add this book here, we also want to add a new store, a new bookstore, right? So we can tell just by, in terms of the logic, we can tell that we want to do the adding at this point, right here. So right after we add it to the UI, after we add the new book to the UI, right? We want to take this book and set it as a new store. right? That's what we want to do. So I had already written this code, so I'll just show you what I had. You can see right here. So we'll go recreating the code pole pole. So right here, you can see what I'm doing. So I'm simply saying book storage. I'm creating a new variable called book storage. So this is the exact spot we are in the other one. So book, first of all, we are adding the tr to the table body. Then we are creating a new variable called book storage. Then I'm using async await. So I'm not using the .then syntax now. I'm now using async await. Right? So async await works this way. It's very easy to read. You simply now change your function into an async function, and then you await your responses like this. We covered promises, I think, a few weeks back, December. And then you simply pass in local forage.get item. So we are looking for a store called books, right? We want to get items from the books store. Okay, so I'll put this side by side, then I'll explain the code. Put it together with this other one. Okay. So this is where we currently are in our implementation as of now. Now we want to add this section here, right? So we know we want to use async await. Okay, so what we do first of all, we need to turn our function into an async. It needs to consume promises. Okay, and then now, right here, this section, what we are doing is we want to create a new variable called book storage. And then we await the response of local forage.get item. So we are looking for a store called books. That's what we are doing. Then the next step is, right, if I have a book storage, so if it's not null, if the response is not null, as we saw before, because we don't have a books store, so the response is going to be a null value, right? So if we have a value, first of all, we simply want to update the store. We want to update the store with the new value. Okay, and the new value, so first of all, we'll simply spread out whatever we have, the book storage, and then add the book to it. So I think I'll make the syntax easy and so that guys can understand. So instead of spreading it this way, right, I will take this code, it is, it and then explain it poorly. We will choose somewhere. Let's write it out poorly. If statement else statement. So if we have a book storage, if we have a value, so if we don't get null when local forage looks for a books store, what do we want to do? So if we already have something there, if we already have an array of books, what do we want to do? So that's the logic that we want to write here. So if book storage, so if we do have a value, right, what we want to do is, right, we want to add a new book object to our existing array. So the way we are storing our books is an array of objects. So if we have the books, the bookstore, we want to add a new object. If we don't, right, if we don't, then we want to create a new one. Okay, so if we do not have it, I think this is, we can start with this logic because it might make more sense. So let's say currently we don't have a books store, right? We don't have it. So what we want to do is we want to set new books. We want to set a new books store. So we say set books, we set it to await local forage because remember, a new item, a new books store, you simply give it the key it will use to store that value, right? And the actual value. So we are storing an array of objects. Because remember, my book, this book is an object. It's the object that is being constructed by the class, the one that has the title, the ISBN, and the, what else was I writing? The author. So if the response is null, we want to create a new book, okay, and then we want to set book storage, this thing here, equal to local forage.get item books. So because we've set a new value, right, now our book storage will now consist of that one book only. So let me console log it so that you can see what I mean, book storage. So if we have a book storage, currently I've not put anything here. So if we don't, we want to set a new item of books and set the first value to an array of objects because book is an object. And then I simply want to set book storage equal to whatever we get from the get item method again, because now for sure we know we have something in the books store. So now let's try it. So now let me come here. Let me add a new book. Let's check the console, see what we have. You can see we have an array. This is coming from line 30, app3.js. Let's look at line 30. So you can see line 30 right here. We are console logging the book storage. So it means we successfully took this book object and then saved it as an array of books. That's why my response is an array that has just one thing within it. And it's the object with the title, the author, and the ISBN. Any question? I know this code might look like a lot, but is it making sense what we are trying to do? Is there something I need to redo or talk about again or go through again before we go into the if statement?
Could you go over again the await section?
The await.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. And then simply take this initial thing we were doing before, and then paste it here. Okay, so now when you want to use the .then syntax, right, when you're consuming promises, because our current code, the way we did it, we could have used the .then, but the code would have become too much code. So async await is a newer version or newer syntax of how to write promises. So if I wanted to rewrite this whole code here, this one that I have here, right, first of all, I'd need a function. Okay, I would need a function clearing clear local. Okay, that's a normal function. Then for me to make this function async, I would simply need to come here and mark it as an async function. And then now, if I wanted to now do this same thing here, but now using async await, okay, I'd simply come here and say const response is equal to await. What are we awaiting? This thing here, local forage.clear. That's what we are waiting. And then normally, the way to handle errors is you need to wrap this whole thing in a try-catch block. So if you've ever interacted with databases like Fetch API, the syntax should look very familiar. Try-catch. So if we have a successful promise that has been resolved, we put this here. If we don't, right, if we have an error, then you can simply console log the error. Like that. So we have replaced this dot thens, this one and the dot catch with this thing right here. So when you use async await, we're simply replacing anything that was using the dot then with now the await keyword. So we are awaiting the response. So in this case, I want to, once we've cleared the database, I simply want to log this right here. Now remove this, should have the same thing. So we've changed our whole code, what we had, into this function. But now we simply need to call that function, clear local. That will do this thing for us. If I now come, and if we check the console, we can see same response. Database is now empty. So with the await, it's simply an easier way to write your promises. We don't want to use dot lens. So you can now use async await to abstract away that too much code. So now your code looks like it's following, or like from this step to this step. It looks more intuitive to even read. So this is simply just a newer syntax, right? Like promises, because you could have come right here where we are doing the awaiting here, and instead of having the await, we have a dot then here, and then we have another dot then here. But the code would have would have been too much code. So async await is a bit more intuitive to write. So let me go back to the example from local forage. Maybe that will also help clear up things. I go to the get item and see if I want to get a new item. If I want to get an existing item, I simply say local forage get item and then some key, right? If you look at my implementation, just close this up. Let me close this again and then simply open it up in app3. Close this up. So if you look at my implementation right here, you can see, right, for get item, this get item function, the same thing here. So the way they wrote it is local forage get item, then give your item a key. What item do you want to get? So in our case, we are getting books. We have an item called books. But you can see I don't have the dot then because I'm using the await. So it means when I come to the next line here at book storage, this thing has already resolved. So I don't need this extra code that you see here. I can handle it using this. I don't have a try-catch block, but that was on purpose. But you can see it's the same thing. I'm simply getting a value, an item called books, and then I simply log it. For set item should be the next one. Same thing, right? Local forage dot set item. So local forage dot set item. The key, which is books, and then the value, which is an array that has the book object. So you can see the key you want to give it and the value. This value can be anything, a string value, a Boolean value, an object. You're simply passing in an array of objects. So now this will set the item. We now have a books store. That's why when you logged it, you are getting the array that has an object. Did I confuse you even more, or is it a bit more clear?
It's getting clear.
Okay. So Now, let's move into the next line. Let's see. So when we have a book, when we have a book storage, when we have a bookstore, basically, right? Because this thing here is first of all looking and checking whether we have a books store. Okay, so if we do have a books storage, right, we don't want to set it to that that object, that array of object, right? We want to add on top of, we want to add a new object, right? That's what we want to do. We want to add a new object. So this code that I've written, this thing, make it bigger so that everybody can see it well. So this here. So book storage updates is equal to await local forage and then set item. Okay, and then I'm setting the books. And then I'm spreading out the book storage. So I'm getting the contents of the book storage. And then I'm adding the new book to it. So initially, right, if I come here and say console log right here, console log book storage, because at this point, we know that we have a book storage already in our application. It exists. So we have an array that has one book, the one that we put when we initially set it, right? So what we are doing here, right, we are simply setting the item, the books again, we are giving it a new value. And the new value is still an array, right, of all the previous books that were in the book storage, plus a new book, plus a new object. So if I now come to my application again, right, we've already cleared the database, so we don't have any books. So because we don't have any books, right, let me first of all actually remove that functionality because it will keep removing all of them. Let's call it. We know our books is empty. We don't have any stores. So it means when we run this function right now, what it should say, right, let me come here. And so when we don't have any book storage, let me just put a message that will tell us for new book record created. Then log the book storage. So now let's do that. So the mocking part 4545. Added the book to the UI. Now let's check the console. We have new book record created. So it means we are running the else statement. It means we did not find a book storage when we did the initial get item. We didn't find a store that has the books key. So it ran the else statement. It set the books to an array of book. The book is coming from, remember, from the constructor. And then it sets the book storage, this book storage, to await local forage.get item. So now after we add new book, let's get the values. Let's get whatever is inside of the books store. And then that's why it's now logging new book created and then book storage. So now we've added a new book, the book object. It has a title of the Mockingbird. So you know there's an object with the title of Mockingbird, ISBN, whatever I wrote, and the author of Harper Lee. So now we should have an array that has that object here, this book storage. So now you can see we have an array that has one thing. If I open it, you can see it's an array. We have the object here, the first element, the one and only element. Author, ISBN, title. So now let's try to add another book. So remember this time, the books store exists. So it will not run this. You will not see new book record created. You will not see it because it will not run this else block. It will run this if block because if is now true, we're not getting null anymore. We do have an array here, a value. And when we log it the first time, you'll see it's an array that simply has the initial book that we set. Okay, so now I will do just that. I will add a new book. So I will simply clear this. Then I will add a new book. And I will have an author, George. Then I will have an ISBN 7878. You can see we are not getting the other console, this new book record created. So it means it ran this statement here, not this else statement. We are now running this else, this if block. So this bookstore should now be logged. And what should it be? It's an object, it's an array with an object inside the title right here. But what are we telling it? We are telling it now, right? Take that book storage, take this book storage, right? Spread out the contents. The content for this book storage is an object. It's that object that we have, right? And then we are creating a new array here. Spread out the initial contents of that book storage array, and then add a new book to it. And the new book is whatever we just input, which is this GOT George. So now, if I, instead of logging it here, right, instead of logging it before we do the set item, if I move this, because at this point we have not done the adding the book, right? If I now move it, I come here. Now I want to see what books we have after I have added the new book. That's what I'm trying to do. I want to see the new items, the new books that we have. Okay, now I don't know whether it's going to work if I just use book storage outputs. I will need to use the get item, but let us try. So we should now have a bookstore that has two books. It's still not persisting because we have not implemented it. It's persisting, but we can't see it in the UI. So let's add a new book. Anything. You can see right here. I open it, we now have the array, but now it has 3 books. So it's updating. We just haven't yet updated it in the UI, but it's updating. The store is updating. If I add a new book again, see now we have 4. We have the array has four things inside. Anybody with a question? Are you guys following? Is the code difficult to read? Is there something confusing you? Maybe someone else wants to take a crack at explaining. A comment, anything I need to go over again. But the documentation for local forage is like pretty straightforward, so it should not take you so long to get what's going on. Anybody with a question? Mambo, what do you think? I've used your. What do you think about the code? Is there anything that's not confusing, that is confusing you? Or Nelson?
It's good. It's okay. I'm following. I'm actually looking it through my machine, and yeah, I can see why you chose to go for local forage, so that you can get that dynamism of different data types.
Yeah. And it's very popular. I think it has like 4 million or 3 million weekly downloads on NPM. So it's used a lot.
Okay. I'll look into it. It's the first time I'm hearing about it actually.
Okay, so it's a nice library. Anyone else? Nelson is still here. You have a comment? Or anyone else? Do we proceed? I go through it again. You guys following along? Are you having any errors on your end? Okay. All right. Okay. Joseph, Kosawa, are you okay? The code making sense. Have you interacted with local storage before?
Yeah, I've used local storage, so and I see they have a similar API, so I pretty much understand what's happening here.
Yeah.
But maybe you can try. Does it use like local storage under the hood?
Yes, it does.
Because maybe you can visualize the storage thing for the mentees to see.
As you see, if you go into the documentation, right here for set driver, they will tell you, right, by default, local storage selects backend drivers for the data store in this order, the index DB. So if you look at your browser and you go into application, there's different storages available to you, right? You can see we have local storage, we have session storage, we have indexed DB, we have web SQL, we have cookies, trust tokens. So you can see from the explanation, where is it? Yeah. By default, local storage will select the backend drivers for the data store in this order. So it will first of all select indexed DB by default, and then web SQL, which is this, and then local storage, which is this. So you can see it's right here, local storage into hapa. So the disadvantage with local storage is the fact that it only stores string values. You'd have to stringify your array before you store it in local storage. But now with local storage, it allows you to store any kind of data type. So that's the benefit of local storage. That's why it now becomes very useful. Okay. So we go through. So I think this section is making sense now. Yeah, simply adding the books. Okay, so you know what is going on here. We have set a new item, and then it simply updates whatever values we had. It simply pushes a new object, a new array, a new updated array into the initial books store. Now we know for a fact that we have those books. We know they're being persisted, right? We know they're being persisted to the storage, right? So now we need to find a way to show them, right? We need to find a way to show them when the user reloads the page, because we know they are there. We know they are there. So now we need to find a way, right, to show those books even when the user does a refresh, right here. We need to show them all here. And because it's an array, what it means is we can loop over it, right? Because local storage gives us that ability to get items based on the key. So we can simply get the books, right? Where is it? Where is it? Set item, get item. We can simply get the books, right? And then loop over them and then show them in the UI. So let's do that. So from my implementation again, where is it? Okay, that's for delete. Now we have a function called onload that runs every time your browser has finished loading. So I will just show it for a minute. So I will, where is that file? app3.js. Remember when you talked about the window object, right? You can start with the window object, dot on load, right? To a function. Then simply say console.log console cl date. Okay, so anytime we finish loading the page, this function is called. So if I come into the UI, I open up tools, go back to the console, and see we have the loaded. If I refresh it again, still there again, still there. So it runs when the UI has finished, when the browser has finished loading the page. So what we want to do is, right, when we finish loading, we want to update the table with the array of books, right? And remember, we can get them using the get item books. So if we look at my implementation again, I'll simply take this code and then I'll explain it bit by bit. And here, I don't need this anymore. And see, we already complain. We have some complaints here. Now, await cannot be used without an async function. So we need to tag our function as an async function. My pretty is refusing to do these things for me. And then what we are doing here is we are simply getting the books, because we know for a fact that we have books, right? We have a list of books. So let me first of all comment this out. So this book storage is simply getting the books from the store. If I console log book storage, this is on load, right? When we finish loading the page, we want to await local forage.get item. So now in the console, we should see the array of books. That's what we need to see. Okay, why is it null? What did we do? I think I cleared. It have cleared, so let's add a new book. See whether that fixes the issue. Mockingbird. Lee. 555. Okay, let's add another one. Okay, so now let's refresh the page. There we go. So you can see those two books I just added, the Mockingbird and this thing, right? This other gibberish. You can see we have an array that has those two objects, right? So when I refresh, I still have that array still there because we are getting it from the books store. It's here. So because we know it's an array, it means we can loop over it. Right? That's what this implementation is doing. So book storage dot for each book. Okay, I'm using an arrow function. It's very simple to just take it back to the normal function. So I'm simply looping over those books, right? And for each book, I want to add onto the table body, right? Inner HTML plus equals, because I don't want to replace the previous book that was there. So if I just have an equals, so currently, just like that, it should work. You can see we have those two books here. Now, if I have the equals sign instead, what it will do, it will replace the initial book. It will not add on to, it will replace the initial book so that we always only have just one book. So if I come here and I write another book, Sparrow, and then just give it some gibberish. Then I reload the page because this is the UI. The UI is the one that's putting it here. But if I reload the page, you can see it's now the sparrow. Now, the way to fix that is the plus equals, because it adds on to whatever is already there. It's not replacing the initial book. It's just adding on to a new book. That's why it works when you use plus equals. And now you can see all the books. If I refresh, we still have all the books. Any questions? Is it making sense? Any questions? Book storage, the for each, the function, the table.ini.html plus equals, backticks. Because we know the table body is from the markup, the table body element. So we add that markup as the inner HTML. So when we do a reload, it always does this. It will simply loop over whatever it has in the book store and now show them in the UI. So for each book, it will render a new TD, like that, every time.
Yeah.
Mm?
The part where from 103 to 107, then 107.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that code exactly identical to the one we were using up there in the UI controller?
Mm-hmm. Yes, this one here, this one has a difference.
It's a little bit different.
Remember here, this is for controlling the,
Oh,
can you see? And then you have the append child. So I had tried it this way, but there was an error. I was getting multiple. It was giving me the wrong value. So what it was doing, it was giving me mockingbird twice and like this gibberish twice and the sparrow twice. So I separated the two. So on reload is when I just want to do the looping. So the UI controller is only for editing just one. So anytime I just add one, this behavior of adding just one is not being done by this code down here. They're separate. This one is only doing it on load. Remember, this other one, this one for the UI is just adding one book to the UI, just one book. You're not looping, you're just adding one book. So this individual book here, down here. And then when we do a refresh, because we've already added the sparrows to the books array, you will not tell a difference. You'll not be able to tell there's a difference because it's the same, right? Because we already have the mockingbird, this, the sparrow, and the sparrows in the books. So when you do a reload, you will not be able to tell there's a difference. That's a good observation. Anybody else? Before we now the interesting part is coming now. Now deleting the book. Because remember, our UI functionality is only deleting in the UI. If I come here and I delete this book here, it's gone, yes, imepotea, can't see it anymore. But if I do a refresh, it's back. That's because it's not deleting in the books store, it's only deleting in the UI. If I do it again, now if I delete this instead, you can see it's not there. But if I do a refresh, it comes back because it has not updated the data in the books store, right? That's why it's coming back. So now here's where the fun part comes. Now, how do we edit? How do we remove the book from the books store? How do we do that? Any ideas on how we can do that? We know that we have the books. We know from here that the book storage is an array of books. Okay. We now need to somehow, right, loop over this books storage and then remove only the item, right, that matches this book. So for example, if I want to remove the mockingbird, okay, I want to remove the mockingbird. I want it to go into the book storage, right, get the object that matches that thing that I clicked on, and then remove it from the bookstore, so that when I do a reload, I don't get it back in the UI. Any ideas on how we can implement that?
So looking at local forage documentation, we have a method to remove item. I think we can but you are going to have to implement it into the delete event listener.
Okay, good. So where is it? Delete, delete, delete.
There. Remove item, remove item.
Remove item. Okay. Okay. So remove item. Look at what remove item is doing. Remove item is removing the key. So it's removing the whole thing. It will remove the whole books, not just the book that we want. Itatoa kila kitu. So what it will do, it will go and remove the whole of the whole array, which is not what we want. We just want to remove one of the entries in the array. Because based off of this documentation, you're giving it the key to remove. The key, remember, is the books. This is the key. This books represents the array. So if you tell it to remove item, itatoa yote. It will remove all your books, not just one book. So very good attempt. But I don't think it has a way to do it like just to remove an element within your array. Now we need to now use JS. We now need to go back to our JS knowledge. Our knowledge of arrays will come in handy here. Okay, let's go through the logic again. We have a books array, right? The books array contains an element we want to remove. Okay, and then we want to return a modified array minus the book that we clicked on. How do we go about that? Now let's walk through the code now. Let's go to the delete functionality. Okay, let's remember what we were doing with the delete functionality here. So remember, we were looking for an item that has the delete, fine. And then I was using now the UI controller. I'm instantiating the UI controller so that I can use UI.alerts, fine. Then I'm getting the parent of the parent because I want to target the table row, right? That's what I'm doing. I want to target the table row and then remove it. So we have access to the target. So now the question is, how do we use this target, right, to filter through our books? Because we can get our books. We can come here, we can take this, code, right? Matters, and then we come here. Let's get our books. Okay, now but that also means we need to turn our function into an async function. Okay. Now we want to get our books. Book storage, console log storage. Again, I know a lot of repetitive code, but I'm usually doing it on purpose so that you guys can understand. Now, let's go and click on a button. I believe this will give you a better visualization of what you are trying to do. Now, let's refresh the page. We still have all the content there. Now, let's delete a book. Let's click. Let's invoke that delete book. Okay. So let's click on this, delete from the UI. We can see here we have our array and it has all our books. So now we need to find a way to find something to be able to identify whatever we clicked on. We already have the target. Sindio, tuko na the target. We know that this target here. This target is the icon. So we can find a way to use this to somehow manipulate this book storage. So we can use an idea, DOM traversal. We need to find, right, what we are interested in, because looking at the array, just intuitively, right, none of the books, even when you're adding books to a library, obviously they should not have the same name, right? So the title should be different. The author can be the same because an author can have 2 books, but the title is unique. Sindio? So we can use the title to filter through the array and then remove, right, or only return the ones that don't match the title. So hint, we need to use filter somewhere. We need to use filter and we need to get the text content, this title. So when you click on something here, so let me show you what I mean by DOM traversal now. If I come here, I clear this, and I come here, right? Let me stop logging this, and instead I will log target. We log this target.parent.parent element. See what this is. Okay, so let's do that. So let's click on this. It's the TR. The TR, right, has the mockingbird, happily, blah, 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 all these things. Okay, we are interested in this thing. This is what we want. Because now we can use this text to filter through our book storage. Let me return that book storage here. And you can have a visual look of what you're doing. Let me click on it again. So the TR is the parent to the parent. And then we can see the first child of this element is this TD. This TD contains the text that we want. We want this text, this one, TJ, HJ, blah, blah, blah. We want to get it from this array. We want to filter through this array and find the thing that matches this text. So TR, we know, is the parent to TD. So we can find the first child, right? And you do that by saying, we know parent element dot first child. So now this should return the first TR. Sorry, the first TD, not the first TR. So let's click on it again. You can see we are getting the first child of the TR. Now we want the text content. We want the mockingbird. We want this text here. This is what we want. So again, you can simply do that. You simply say dot text, I think it's text content. Let's try again and see whether we just get the text without the markup. There we go. Let's try again. Let's load. Let's click on the mockingbird. We have the mockingbird. Good. Now we have the value, right? We have the value we need to filter based off of. So what we can do now, we can simply set this must equal to must filter value is equal to target dot parent element dot first child dot text content. So this filter value will now give us whatever text we want. Let's console log and see. Filter value. Let's go into our code. Let's click on the sparrows. We have the sparrows. Let's click on the mockingbird. We have the mockingbird. Good. Now, the next thing we need to do, right? Because we know we have the books storage. Have the books storage, right? We now need to set a new value to the books. So we need to loop over this book storage, okay, and filter the values. So this is the code I'm going to push on GitHub. So I will go through that implementation. So it's the exact same thing. I've just gone step by step. Now let's go into that implementation right here. Right here. This, paste it into app3.js. Then you will tell me whether it makes sense, whether the code is making sense. So now, what we are doing is, right, simply saying local forage dot set item. I want to set the book stores equal to book storage dot filter. Okay, and then the book object, the individual book objects, and then return the book titles that do not match the filtered text, which is this filtered value. You can just change this to filtered value. So we will return a list of books that do not match this value that we put in here. Again, I'm simply setting a new item, giving it a new value. So let me make this easier for you guys. I will simply remove this, passing it inline. I will simply pass it in here. First, new array is equal to book storage dot filter, and then that's the new value I want to give my array, my books. If I come here and I console log new array, right? So what it will do, because we know we have this value, and the way filter works, we will loop over the array and then return all the elements that do not match the filtered value. The filtered value is whatever we picked off the text node. So kama ni the mockingbird, right? It will loop over the objects, right? Look for the objects, only return the objects that don't have a title that matches the mockingbird, and then set that as the new value. So let's try. Let's do a delete. So now we can see after it's filtered, it's removed the one that we clicked on. Let me click on sparrows. So this is the first instance. If I click on sparrows, it should now loop over the array and delete the sparrow from the books and just give it a new value, just return a new value. You can see we now have 2 and the sparrow is gone. And then if I do a refresh, we are still, now we have the correct data. I know that was a lot of code, but like this is a perfect example of DOM traversal. You can, like, remember what I told you about the DOM, like being a tree, you can move from one branch to the other. So we simply used the target to find the text node of the first child. Anytime you have, if you think about it that way, it will make a lot of sense. It will now be very easy to even traverse the DOM. Any questions, any comments? Does anyone think, can anyone think of like a better implementation that maybe you had in mind? What do you think about that implementation? Joseph, are you still here? He left.
Still here.
Yeah. What do you think? Would you have implemented it differently?
That's why I asked you that time whether you care about the data, because this is what I was thinking the implementation should look like.
Yeah.
The only thing that I'll change maybe is to add an ID on each one, and then maybe like delete based on an ID.
Yeah, that would also work. That would also work. But you'd have to do the same thing basically. You'd still have to do like book.id.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to do
But this
something.
is how, like this is how delete is done actually in React and everything. This exact pattern. Yeah, and search, like if you want to search through maybe some like some list or something, you do the same thing using filter. The reason I use filter is because it doesn't mutate the original array. Like it's all about the immutability here. So that's why filter is the correct choice in this case. You could also use map, but like filter is the proper choice to get like filtered array based on like your value. So maybe you can add that. Like it's a very, very common pattern in React. So it's something that it's worth like looking at and understanding what's happening.
Yeah. Anyone else with a comment or anything to add? But basically, I think it's done. I don't think there's any other functionality. Because now if you delete all the books, maybe the set time mode for that, maybe something I can add. So nothing, if I now refresh, we get nothing. So it's working perfectly. If I add a new book, added, if I refresh the page, the book is persisting. Yeah. So I think that project, it looked like it was a very small project, but it's ended up being quite involving. But I believe we've learned a lot as a result. So you guys can take a look at local forests. Even me, I just found out about it yesterday. And just when I went through the documentation, I realized it's a very good library. So I just started to use it Jana too, just yesterday. And you can see it's very, provides a very clean implementation. Again, we can optimize this code like to have very few redundancies. But remember, we are trying to, first of all, go the redundant direction, and then eventually you guys will optimize your code pole pole. We don't want to start with optimization because that will confuse you. Like what I had done initially, because I can pass a bunch of these things as, I don't need to have lets and const. I can just pass them inline, but I'm not doing that because I want you guys to understand. All right, so I'll push this code to GitHub. Then you guys can have a look at it. I hope that session was not too much for you guys. Eunice, are you okay? Albert, I see you're here. I didn't see you.
Yeah. I'm just enjoying the code. No, nothing to
Okay.
add. Local forage actually, me too. It is my first time. But
Yeah.
can you now that you're on that screen, just don't go away. No.
Yeah.
Just inspect the page. Now, which
Okay.
one was it? Actually, not this page. The page, the page for the application. Inspect it. Go to the application so that you can see the storage. I just want to open that local storage. What is now being stored?
Yeah.
You have
so
nothing.
there's nothing there. So I think,
Okay.
I'm not sure how it's implementing it because it's not putting it here. So let's do it again. Now let's come here. Let's put a new book. Sure, we are missing something in the documentation. Because now, if you there's nothing here, Bado. Now, if you go to the documentation, they're saying, if you go to the driver section, they're saying, it's first of all going to use the index DB and then web SQL and then local storage. But if I go into indexed DB, open it up, so let's actually put it here. I think it's actually using this.
But where is the actual data?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to look for.
Maybe check in the second.
Yeah, I opened this up.
3 items. Oh, okay.
It is.
Yeah, there it is.
It's using the indexed DB first. and then defaults to the second option is web SQL, and then now local storage.
Oh, no, I'm good.
Anybody else? Catherine, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay. How did you have you ever worked with local storage before?
Not really.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So I think local storage is a good starting point. It's pretty intuitive to even work with. It's not that hard to follow. Yeah. Nelson, are you still with us?
Yeah, I've learned a lot today.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. Also, there's something else I wanted to introduce you guys to, but just go do a brief roll call, and then I'll show you that library. Just chanced upon it yesterday. Rekesa, are you okay? Were you able to follow through the code?
Yeah, it was a lot to take in, but pole.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Tukisema tufunge live server and that window then we reopen again, will it still have our data ama itakuwa imepotea? How long can this local storage store the data?
So let's try, because even I am not sure. So let's try. Let's simply stop the server. And then let's start it up again. So it seems like it may clear the minute you close. The minute you close the server, it's clearing the data. As you see, I've just opened in the same port, just closed the server, reopened it, and it's gone. So I think that's why it's different from local storage, because if I'm not wrong, local storage will persist even if you stop the server and you start it again. I think that's a difference maybe with indexed DB, but I'll have to do like more research. But if you use local storage, it stores it, even if you close the server and you open again, bado itakuwa hapo. That's a very nice question. I had not even thought about that.
Okay, and now that it only stores strings, so it means you can't save things like media.
Things like media, I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure you can. I'm pretty sure you can. And I think there's some config file you can configure. You see, it has a config file. But it's something I'd have to do more research on. But I'm pretty sure it can. I'm pretty sure it has an implementation for that as well. So I think I'll get back to you on that. But even you guys can do your research and find out.
Okay, so
Fatma, hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. What about you?
I'm good. It's nice to see local forage. I've used local storage before, but I hadn't heard of local forage. I genuinely thought it was like a spelling error when I first joined. Um, but yeah, it's good to see that in action.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's looks like a more powerful implementation of like local storage. It gives you more options basically. And before you guys joined, I had you can look at 3JS. They've used OOP to implement the library. I think that will give you guys an opportunity to see a library that is very popular and they use object-oriented. We discussed that before you joined. You and who else? I think Joseph was already here, and Albert. Albert, we had talked about. Do you know 3JS?
Not really.
So let me just show it before we end. So this library uses OOP. Where was it cached this? It's a very nice library. So this is what you can create with 3JS. So if you look at the docs, you will see that it is using OOP. You can see the new keyword here. So yeah, so OOP is being used in some of the best libraries. So you can have a look at it and play around with it. What else is here before we end? All right, so I guess that's it for today. Jeff, I have not checked on you. Jeff, what time did you join? Were you able to follow the code?
I think I joined around when it started, about 10 minutes later.
Okay. So you are
Yeah.
able to follow.
Yeah.
Okay. Sasa. All right. So I'll push the code to GitHub. And then like if you guys have any questions, you can ask tomorrow. I think tomorrow we can wrap up on OOP. Whatever is left, we can wrap up on it. And then now from Wednesday, we can look at other stuff. But we've done like the core stuff in object-oriented. With that knowledge, you should be able to like build like nice stuff with object-oriented. Right, so I will see you guys tomorrow. Thanks for joining and enjoy the rest of your evening. Tutaonana kesho.
Are you pushing the code tonight?
Yeah, just now. Just
Okay.
literally just now.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, bye guys.